I will hand over to Maya to guide the final discussion.
Thanks. I would like to share my screen very quickly, but it's just an as introduction to our final discussion here. Wait. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for the interesting and wonderful insights and for being here and asking and answering. That was extremely interesting from a lot of points of view. So, okay, I want just to give a sort of wrap up of what we discussed so far. And I was thinking that because there were extremely different but also related points of view and argument discussed, I was trying yesterday to materialize all those discussions and concepts into a word cloud, which gave me also a lot of insights in, so not only the words that I use, because of course then in today's talk we had much more deepened arguments, but also of the concepts that are very crucial. So at least the one you used in your extended abstract. And of course, as you see here, there is knowledge, materials, time structures, and so on, learning and skills that are popping up. And so those are more or less very schematically all the topics that more or less all of you were touching in your presentations and your talks. And I would like to start this final discussion by asking all of you speakers a question that I was thinking about yesterday, and because you are stressed in many talks, some with more intensity, some less, but also this sort of power structures in the transmission of knowledge, in the creation of apprenticeship ties. And so I would like all of you I would like to have a comment from you also on this, because the impression was that in some cases, there was not really problematic, the exchange of craft, the exchange of knowledge and of skills, but in other cases, it's so much more problematic, and the knowledge was kept away. Like, so we see in the case of the valley, so and the comparison with what is crafts on stones, so in modern times. So I would just like to start this panel discussion asking you more insights about this, so which is something that is very interesting me, because it also concerns, of course, identity, types of identity, and the way this identity can be very exclusive and not inclusive. Thank you. Who would like to start answering to this? Trevor, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And thanks for that question. It's a very interesting one. And I would imagine that for archaeologists, it's a question that's very difficult to answer because the social interaction has simply disappeared. So how do you get access to that hierarchy, the power relations, and the way things were actually transmitted? It's a tough question. But again, I think a lot of the answers can be found by looking at contemporary craft practices around the world, because as humans, the power dynamics don't change that much. I'd just like to refer back to a comment that Nadia made in her fascinating talk. And she said that very rarely do we ever hear about skill being related to power. Have I disappeared? I see a look of horror on your face, Maya.
No, sorry, I pressed something myself. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button on my Zoom. Sorry for my face.
Yeah, Nadia said that that skill is very rarely associated with power. And I would actually, I mean, it's an interesting observation, but I think I would disagree. In fact, in many of the communities that I've worked in around the world, although craftspeople might be a little bit kind of lower on the social strata or the totem in society, they might not be the richest or the politically most powerful. They are normally recognized as having kind of a certain power associated with their specialized knowledge. They're able to transform raw materials into cultural objects with symbolic meaning. They have the knowledge of fire. They have the skills that nobody else in the society has. This is where this idea, this concept of the expert comes from. So I think that there is a power play there, and that power often manifests itself in keeping the knowledge within a very contained circle. Even between masters and apprentices, apprentices often have to work very hard to get the knowledge of their masters. They often have to, the term that Michael Herzfeld uses and I use is that they have to steal the knowledge because it's not going to be freely explained to them. I think the simple explanation to that is often an economic one. In a society where there's only so much demand for high-level craftsmanship, only so many people can do the job. And if all of your apprentices become experts, they become your biggest threat. They become the threat to your own livelihood. And I would imagine that that has probably always been the case throughout history, is that, in fact, the transmission of knowledge has to be carefully controlled and monitored as it is passed along. And which is why I think that traditionally, and even in many of today's society, craftwork is kind of bounded by rituals. It allows certain people in through initiation and keeps others out, and keeps some just on the boundaries. So anyways, I'll end there. I liked your question, so thanks for that.
Thank you very much for your answer. Sorry again about my face, but it was more related to, of course, technical problem that to your wonderful answer. Is there anybody? Okay, there is Nadia. Then she wanted to answer.
No, just a small comment. I absolutely agree with you. We don't say skill is power. I just meant the Middle European winged word, knowledge is power. So you're absolutely right. In other parts of the world, it's another case. Yes, sorry. I didn't want to irritate.
Not at all. I really loved your paper, and I'm hoping we can pick up later on, maybe in the discussion, on what you mentioned about DIY. But okay. I thought that was very interesting. Maybe we can come back to it later on.
Okay.
Okay, there is a comment from Nikos.
Yes, something as a supplementum to what has been said. First of all, I was thinking that in various times, technical knowledge has been advertised, if you wish, or published either through the very detailed Egyptian depictions of the late Bronze Age, or through epics. Remember, the description of the shield of Achilles in Homer is a technical manuscript, actually, very detailed. They don't keep anything hiding. There are still people who are trying to make it. So these may go against I think we have also to think that what was rare in many times was materials. Okay, so tin, for example, for making bronze, that was rare, rather than the knowledge of how to make bronze. And also that these kind of specialized technologies, like other technologies, new technologies in antiquity, which writing, may have been restricted in their function, so restricted for the power structure. So writing was used only on palatial, let's say, context at some early parts, but this doesn't mean that scribes among themselves didn't transmit their own knowledge. So there are different levels where knowledge may have been restricted, not necessarily in the level of the craftsman or craftsperson. And certainly, as far as we know from written sources, either from Egyptian or from Greek or from Roman, craftsmen were very rarely considered status persons or were very wealthy. I mean, the standard is that they were considered as vanavsi, as somebody who's doing a dirty job.
Thank you for your answer. Yes, I'm. This is exactly also one of the points that I was also interested in. But I would like to give the word to Sarah because she wants also to comment on this.
I had a very general thing to say, that Yulia and I talked about the relationship between knowledge and social hierarchies at great length. And unfortunately, it didn't fit into our final paper, but something that Yulia brought from the IDA evidence is how restriction of individual craftspeople and their ability to communicate their technical knowledge spirals out into all aspects of the social structure of the area. So it's not just about where you can work and how you can work, it's also about how freely you can move through the landscape and whether or not you have access to money, or whether you're reliant on other people to lend you money and that sort of thing. So from a relatively minor initial element of control, it has a very dramatic effect on all aspects of society, craftspeople and non-craftspeople.
Thank you, Sarah, for this very interesting remark. And I am going to give the word to Mark Pierce because he has a general comment.
Yeah, I know I wasn't a speaker today, but I do want to add some thoughts to this particular very interesting question. And particularly it's the issue of secrecy and keeping craft mysteries, as they were called by the guilds, the trade guilds in medieval London. Now, we know that silk technology and porcelain came to the West by being stolen, just as Trevor mentioned, used that word of stealing knowledge. And of course, the Chinese didn't want us to have those knowledges because it created competition, precisely as Trevor mentioned. And I wondered if thinking about that stealing of the technology and stealing of the knowledge of silk and of porcelain doesn't tell us something about the way that copper technology spread through the old world. I mean, we generally see it as a process of diffusion, of people teaching, of knowledge traveling, but it takes place in very strange ways. And I wonder if we shouldn't actually ask, well, was it really like that? Was that spread of metal technology actually about industrial espionage, about stealing, about apprentices observing and stealing the knowledge and then moving on and becoming competitors? Just a question to throw into the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for this. Yes, Trevor, please.
Thanks, Mark, for that question. I think that's fantastic, and especially that you brought it back to the old liveries, the guilds in London. In fact, in my forthcoming book, I spend a lot of time looking at the history of the competition between the different timber trades. So there were the wheelwrights, and there were the carpenters who built, wooden structures. There were the turners. Even the timber crafts were divided between different liveries, and the shipbuilders as well. And when one of them stepped on the toes of the other, and when craftspeople got involved in the work of other craftspeople, it involved the city of London to rule about what was going on. There were laws set down about who could partake in certain kinds of work. So in fact, I mean, there was you could almost say that the whole history of the city of London is built around the rules and regulations that contained and guided craft work, even those working with the same materials. So I think the question of dissemination of knowledge is a very important one. How did knowledge, skills, how did they travel? But also, how were they controlled? And again, I think that's probably, again, a more difficult one for archaeologists to determine, especially if they're working in a prehistorical context. But it is a fascinating one, is the control. That tells us a lot about human relations and about the power and the hierarchy that you were interested in earlier, Maya. So.
Thank you. Indeed, this was, it's a very difficult, archaeologically speaking, there's something that is very difficult to assess, but of course it's of great interest, and we are giving our best sometimes to try to understand actually this type of structures for our archaeological record. I'm giving the word to Nadia. She wants to comment on this, on Mark's statement.
Just a small comment. As you mentioned, the porcelain knowledge stealing, I'm not sure if it's so easy to steal knowledge. Actually, the porcelain case, as Europeans stole Petунze and kaolin, which you need for porcelain making, they didn't know anything and they couldn't make porcelain. It was very hard to find out. They had to steal it again and again, the knowledge, because it's not just self-explaining. I'm not sure if you really can steal knowledge without any allowed insight to the craft. So this is just a small comment. And there are some funny stories, Chinese sources about when they are laughing about Europeans doing a lot of mistakes, because porcelain is completely different from normal clay. It's not comparable. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. There is Thomas who wants to ask something, has a comment.
Sorry, I would like to comment more, and I would like to talk about bottlenecks of knowledge transmission. And my son is commenting, so don't worry about it.
I feel you.
Anyway, what I think we talk about in archaeology often about traditions, you know, and we have learned, of course, we learn that knowledge transmission is, of course, one side is the embodied knowledge and the extended mind with the body. And we learn, of course, the tool making and all these things going with materials. But I think there is often very much renewal, and it's not so much tradition we're talking about. It's often also renewal, and there is often also forgetting. So it's not only stealing or, you know, spying on techniques and so on and so forth. We also see, and this is, I really turn to the comment of Trevor, it's, you know, it's if you have not the economy being behind and stabilize your crafts, then it's also the forgetting and the fading out of a tradition, something that we have to face within our archaeological record. And commenting on Mark's copper aspect and metal and with mining, which I'm dealing much with, I would say this is a very important fact. And if we talk about diffusion, and I think it's too narrow-minded to talk about autochthonal situation or diffusion. It's much more complicated, and forgetting, I stress this again, is a very important part of this, yeah? And renewal and new invention. So for my observation.
Thank you, Thomas, for this remark. Are there other remarks, or maybe we can go back to the chaîne opératoire, because as far as I remember, there were some questions on this in our discussion earlier. So, okay, Trevor is also leaving us. Thank you very much for being with us. It was really an honor.
That starts in 2 minutes and I can't get out of it. But thank you. I really enjoyed meeting you all, and I loved the discussion. We should stick around.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For the support and joining us. Thanks.
I loved it. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you, Trevor. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I just
Yes,
want to make a
Constanze?
comment. I don't know if it's my turn. No? Maya, may I?
Yes, you can do this.
From a theoretical point of view, and I'm trying to do my best to learn crafts, but I'm far from becoming a craftsperson. But what is most interesting for me in transferring crafts or learning processes is the fact that while you are learning and while you are doing the practice again and again, it always changes. I mean, we do have that, it's the expression from Derrida and other philosophers, a practice is not stable, even though we want to consider it like that. But also these differences, if the body of the craftsperson is different, perhaps not that strong or stronger, the person moves differently, or all these impacts if it's a new context and so on. And I wanted to raise this question, how you experience that in your work. And I think Arcus perfectly show how the craft developed in a certain way by new aspects. And it's one of the rare cases I can see where people were able to trace that in an archaeological context. And maybe we can discuss that topic a bit more. Maybe it's only my interest, but I would be keen in hearing your opinions about that.
The question is for me.
For everybody, but of course you're the expert on that.
Well, I'm not expert, but I talk about my experience that you don't know where to go. You don't know your destination. You just follow what something which comes from inside of you. Maybe it's the idea, maybe it's the tool, maybe it's the material. All the time you learn from this. Many times you learn from the material. Many times you learn from the way you use a tool. Many times you learn from the force you are using to make something. So I can't define I can't make an answer for this question, but for a craftsman is a way of living. And sometimes you don't know where to go. You are guided from something, sometimes you cannot control. I don't know if I can explain it easier, but sometimes you feel that you are in a channel with the idea, the material knowledge and the tool knowledge, and your body guides you somewhere. And it's a way of living when you work. It's only which I understand that during working you feel the real time. So I don't know if I can say something more. It's different because you are trying to describe something for the craftsman, which is their life. And the only way to understand is to stay shoulder by shoulder or side by side for a long period to understand each other. So for me, is like I told you before, working with you, it's learning so many things. Also, for you, it's something which it's difficult to explain. Also, explain what is skill, it's something which for some people it's a way of living. Any movement you do, it's an innovation. Any new thought, you have something in your mind and you try to express it in a new way. So you find a new tool, find a new movement. You read a lot, you use the knowledge which is given to you, and you go on.
Thank you, Aki.
Thank you too. It's difficult to explain it.
Thank you very much. We have Aydin who wanted to give a comment.
Yeah, I think everybody can find something that she or he can do quite well and elaborate thinking, feeling about what he or she is doing in that situation. It's like with cooking or whatever. No, I mean, it's not just a recipe you have and basically you follow the recipe. If you follow a recipe, it's not, most of the cases, it's not going to work out super well. It is, you've done it a couple of times and you understand when is the moment to do something, because it's not just a, like, now you do this, then you do that, but it is a very, it's observing everything and feeling everything and then doing the right thing at the right time and adjusting everything. So you can basically, it's more kind of like adjusting continuously to get to a good point, to get to a satisfying point in the end. But I wanted actually to ask something, Akis, about what he referred to in a small side sentence, the evolvement of your own and maybe also moral and mental build by doing things. I heard this in a, you were referring to it very like in a side note, but it seems quite important to craftspersons if they are doing something not completely alienated from themselves, no? The growth while doing and in the years while growing, in doing something, growing mentally and emotionally and morally also.
The only thing is I can tell you how I feel this during making things. Well, when I started with Nikos and Eleni and all this group, I never believed that we could go so far. So if I have today a question, what I want to do or what I want to learn, maybe the answer will be after some time. So the important, if we talk about power, the power is the belief we have to continue and to go somewhere where we don't know where to go. For me, this is important, that this guides me to develop what I have as an idea or as a material or as a technique. There is a belief, and I think that every craftsman has a belief to continue and to go on. We don't know where. Every time you put something in front of you, I say, okay, I try to do it and then continue and continue and continue. So maybe at the end of our life, we see if we have developed ourselves and the important thing for us is that we can see it or we can read it as a result on the surface of the materials we work. It is like a script, and this helps us a lot to understand if we go on or if we are stable, if we make circles or I don't know. But it's easy for a craftsman working with materials and his tools. He sees the results on the surface of the material and the materials he works with or the tools. And if you see how many tools we have made or during these years, you can't believe it. Every time you make a new tool because you invent a new way to use it or a new movement. So I don't know if I have the right answer for your question. Or maybe Nikos can say something which he observes all this procedure from another angle, and maybe he has something else to say.
I'll just say that the relation with Akis took time, with Akis as a craftsman, okay, took time because initially he was asking things that didn't really understand what he was asking. So he was asking something, what? So we both had to make quite a lot of steps in order to develop a common language there. He had to come back to understand that we don't use iron in the bronze age, but he said this is made with an iron tool and said, okay, perhaps, but we haven't found it, so we cannot suggest it. And I had also to go there. So it takes some time to start developing this kind of thing. And there are also two things, if you allow me, I guess, that first of all, there are two types of craftsmen. One is the craftsmen who really admire what they did. Akis is one of them, okay, who admired very much. So it took a lot of time to discuss about these things that, you know, these kind of guys, they were human beings, okay. There are other craftsmen who are very confident in their own work, and they feel that they know everything. I know how. And we have seen also some still in the Rubenstein. That, you know, they understand very easy. That was made just like that. That's it. So, you know, you have to be very humble there and work and leave the time to work. That's it. I don't want to.
May I say something to this? Do I have the time?
Yes, please. Then I
There
will
is
pass
a
it on to Margaret.
conversation,
Yes.
with a long conversation with Nikos, because I have studied some objects, Mycenaean objects, where I can see tool marks from steel. Nikos tells me, no, we can't say that. So this is important for me. So I must find a new alloy which could have a result like a steel. And then I make several alloys with tin, with very high percentage of tin, more than 15-17% of tin. And then it was very sharp, and the edge was very sharp, but I couldn't hammer it. So I had to hammer it red. It was annealed red. And maybe for me, this was the step that they knew that iron could be hammered in red. So this is a knowledge which I didn't have before. This knowledge came through the conversation with Nikos, and then you make a problem in your mind, you have to solve it. And it is solved. I can cut with this hard tool, it's about more than 15% of tin, because when you make an alloy, you lose a percentage of tin by melting it in copper. So I don't know the right percentage now, but I started from 17 or 18. And now the cutting is similar under the microscope with my Mikine. We don't know if it was steel or if it was hard alloy of bronze, but the way we use the procedure to learn, this helped us a lot, both of us. This is an innovation for me. I tried to find a solution for something which I didn't have before. So I had a good lesson out of this conversation. I learned something.
Thank you, Akis. It was a very, very interesting remark. I enjoyed a lot your answer to this. And there is Mark, who has a question to Nadia and Akis.
Yeah, I was very interested in something that Akis said during his brief contribution to the joint paper. And I think that Nadia's response to my previous question also plays into this. And that is, what is the relationship in learning between doing and observing, between looking carefully, and between actually doing, actually practicing? I mean, how is it? I mean, Nadia as a potter and Akis as a goldsmith. I mean, can you comment on this? You know, because I'm struck about how archaeology works. When we study an object, the looking is very, very important. Traditionally, we do that through drawing. We'll sit down and we'll draw an object, and that will help us to concentrate on the detail. And of course, people don't draw anymore. People now take photographs, they do 3D reconstructions. Most young archaeologists have lost the skill of drawing. So it's of interest to me as an archaeologist, in my skill as an archaeologist, but I think it's also a general point for the session. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
Nadia, first I follow you.
Sure. Yeah, some things. The relationship about between doing and observing. Let me answer with some observations neuroanthropologists made. While you're observing, the same regions in your brain are active as when you are doing the movement you observe. So while you are observing intently, you are preparing your body for the action that will follow. So it's quite similar to observe intently and to do so. And while you are gaining skill during repeating the doing, the activity in your brain will decrease. So a master will not have so much measurable activity in his brain than a beginner. And this is fascinating. This is cognitive knowledge shifted into your body. So this is the relation between observing and doing. And observing is a very important part. As I said, you prepare your body understanding. Yeah, have I answered this? Okay. And while I'm observing, I really feel what the actual maker is doing. I feel it in my fingers, in the spine, and in my arms. And I'm actually not, I would not call me a potter. Yeah.
So now it's my turn.
Yeah.
Well, I can't say. I can describe how it works to me. So I feel that observing is the first step of making images in my mind. And so this is why sometimes I say I like to dream, because I make these images and then I try to express these images by making. And by comparing what I have in my mind and what I can see in front of me, then I develop the movement. So always I'm trying to follow what is written in my mind through observation. So it means that it has to do with a bank of knowledge and information we have, every one of us, in our mind. So this is the difficulty of sharing what we want to share. We have to make an image on the people's mind like the image we have in our mind. So the narration of the technique or of describing, I believe, is very useful also in teaching. So I believe to this by making images and then continue to follow these images in practice. I don't know if I help, but this is the way it works to me.
Thank you very much. I think that we will let this as the last remark of our session. I would like to thank all of you for being here, for discussing with us. And I found the direct question, the discussion, really useful for a fruitful exchange of experiences. So thank you all. I would like to remind you that the next appointment is Friday, 11 December. Yes, so thank you all for being here until the very end. Thank you very much to all of you.